Funerary practices have always been a part of the human social history. The undeniable inevitability of death has forced societies for centuries to learn how to cope with its eventuality and role in life. Thus, responses to death and the rituals and beliefs surrounding it vary widely across the world. Through often being the product of religious beliefs, these funerary practices retain traces of culture's integral characteristics that dictated their everyday lives.
A prime example of this can be seen through the analysis of the Celtic tribes who dominated Central Europe during the Iron Age, from approximately 800 BCE to Roman conquest in the 1st century. The funerary practices of the Celts reflect their religious attitudes with a focus on belief of life after death. These practices also exhibit the ideologies and material aspects of their culture that dictated their living environments. Significantly, this reveals Celtic social structures, including the role of women, artistic aptitude and trade routes. Thus, this establishment of knowledge made available by the study of this ancient civilization's funerary sites reflects the significance in preserving our local cemetery located in Tewantin as a heritage site. This invaluable resource presents a comprehensive picture of our local culture, past and present, which is why, as a historian, it gives me great pleasure to be involved with the preservation of one of our most significant sources of local history.
Archaeological sites throughout Europe provide an abundance of sources that reflect Celtic rituals and practices associated with death. Varying across periods and regions, their funerary practices have been characterised by methods including cremation burial, tumulus graves, and inhumation, usually in cavities or enclosures beneath the ground, and located in cemeteries near a settlement. Often these burials were accompanied by a single stone, were covered with stones, or in some cases, a ditch was dug around the grave to act as a form of memorial.
In particular, the funerary practices of the Celts provide significant insight into the religious beliefs of this ancient cultural group. It was a common practice of the Celts to bury a range of grave goods with the deceased. The incorporation of these items suggests a belief in the afterlife. The infamous Roman general Julius Caesar, who first came in contact with the Celts in 58 BCE, stated that at Celtic funerals, all possessions that had been significant to the deceased, even living creatures, were thrown onto the funeral pyre during cremation. The majority of Celtic graves discovered have also possessed a number of artefacts alongside the body.
These range from food, wine, urns, jewellery, decorative items, tools and weapons, to even lavish items such as chariots. The tradition of burying the dead with items has endured in many cultures, typically for the purpose of use in an afterlife. This belief is further certified by a Greek historian and witness to the Celtic traditions, Diodorus, who wrote, "Among them the doctrine of Pythagoras prevailed that the souls of men were immortal, and after completing their terms of existence they live again, the soul passing into another body. Hence, at the burial of the dead, some threw letters addressed to the dead relatives onto the funeral pile, believing that the dead would read them in the next world." Thus, the numerous examples of grave goods demonstrate that Celtic religion encompassed a belief in the afterlife.
The funerary practice of the Celts also reveal the ideologies and values of this diverse group of peoples, particularly indicating the social stratification of the society. The differentiations between the Celtic graves that have been discovered demonstrate that death rituals were tied to social rank, or as commended art historian Neil Collins states, society became sufficiently prosperous enough to support a clear hierarchy, whose upper ranks were interred in richly furnished graves.
In Hallstatt, Austria, some 1,300 graves were uncovered. Many provided an example of a simple burial with only a few items such as ceramics, baskets, and simple tools. This suggests a lower ranking in society, such as that as a farmer or labourer. A grave discovered in Marne, France, possessed more significant items, even including a chariot, which is believed to be akin to being buried with your sports car today. This suggests the grave belonged to a person of higher social class and wealth, which resulted in more elaborate burial. One of the most ornate Celtic burials was unearthed in Hochstorf, Germany. The grave itself consisted of an 8-metre high tumulus, with stone and timber protecting the crypt. Inside the crypt, they found the remains of a male lying stretched out on a bronze couch and surrounded by valuable artefacts. The grave was concluded to be that of a chieftain or nobleman, the discovery revealing the presence of an aristocracy in the Celtic society. Furthermore, a significant factor in the laws and customs of the Celts was the equality and harmony between men and women that was unique in ancient culture, with the Egyptians also being the exception. A grave discovered in Vix, France is believed to have belonged to a woman of prominence and demonstrates that the Celtic funerary practices were not limited to the male sex. The lady at Vix was buried in a tumulus grave with an elaborate funeral wagon, food and jewellery. The writing of Roman historian Arminius Marcellinus gives an animated description of Celtic women. A whole band of foreigners will be unable to cope with one Gaul in a fight. If he calls in his wife, stronger than he by far, with huge flashing eyes, least of all when she swells her neck and gnashes her teeth, and poisoning her huge white arms, begins to rain blows mingled with kicks, like shots discharged by the twisted cords of a catapult.
While overstated, the writings of Marcellinus support the conclusions indicated by the burial sites of the strength and position of women within society. As discussed, these customs and careful preparation of all deceased, from the most humble to the most wealthy, is an indication of the social strata present in most ancient societies.
Another aspect of the Celtic lifestyle that can be interpreted from their funerary practices is an understanding of their material culture. By analysing the remains of grave goods discovered in burial sites, we are able to comprehend the level of sophistication within the society, especially in their artistic ability, and even determine particular trade routes through the presence of diverse items.
Roman depictions of the Celts were often biased against them, whom the classical people viewed as barbarians. It is likely that the Romans, who had come to conquer a large portion of Celtic territory, distorted their documentation of the culture for the purpose of reflecting themselves as more civilised. Today we are able to dispute these Roman claims due to the level of craftsmanship required to produce many of the objects found in Celtic graves.
For example, the burial site of a Celtic princess that was discovered in Nuremberg, Germany, contained extravagant items such as elaborate pearl earrings, solid gold clasps, and an amber necklace and a bronze belt. These finds suggest that the Celts had an interest in culture and comfort, thus maintained a level of sophistication and advancement which contradicts the violent and barbaric persona described by the Romans. Many other finds concluded that the Celts were skilled metalworkers who decorated nearly everything from the simplest cloakpins to swords, their skills exceeding the Greeks and Romans. More than 2,500 years ago, at a burial mound in Inns in West Switzerland, they left behind a golden globe-shaped object, less than an inch in diameter, that was decorated with approximately 3,600 granules, another example of the incredibly intricate goldwork the Celts could produce.
These rich Celtic tombs also show the importance of trade in the Iron Age, providing evidence of exchanges with other cultures, which allows us to determine the interaction the Celts had with the outside world.
The tomb of a Celtic prince discovered in Laval, France, contained an assortment of luxury items, including imported Mediterranean vessels and gold jewellery. A finely crafted bronze wine cauldron and a black figure Greek wine pitcher indicates that the Celts had a healthy trade and political ties with the Greeks and Etruscans. Early archaic Greek pottery also appeared in the Western Hallstatt graves, along with numerous objects further evidencing widespread trade with every corner of the Mediterranean. The embroidery in Chinese silk that was present on the clothes of the Hochstorf noblemen demonstrates that Celtic trade even spanned as far east as China. Thus, these examples of Celtic funerary practices and burial sites reveal numerous prominent features of a society in relation to their social and environmental attributes.
In this way, the funerary practices of our local community also demonstrate numerous characteristics about our culture. Despite the fact that the Celts existed around 3,000 years ago, burial and funeral customs remain to be a significant tradition in our lives, in which the deceased are treated with utmost respect and remain to comprise complex beliefs. Although some element of organisation in regards to the deceased has always existed, the reasoning behind the arrangement has changed, especially within our Western culture.
Funeral customs vary widely in our community due to our multicultural arrangement and various religious affiliations, and the assortment of customs each require. However, at the same time, our community is also becoming more secularised, which means there are also appropriate funerary practices for those who live their lives without religious belief. Unlike the Celts, people are no longer confined to a cultural tradition and rather can have personal preference on how they want their remains to be disposed.
Modern cemeteries, like our local site, are not only among the most valued historical resources, but also one of the most treasured archaeological, because they can reveal information about historic events, lifestyles, religions, and even genealogy. The Celtic society relied heavily on oral tradition, thus their burial practices did not involve inscriptions and writing. However, today we predominantly rely on the usage of writing, which is demonstrated through our own written records and inscriptions on tombstones.
These captions can be reminders of various settlement patterns and serve as a directory of early residents and reflect the ethnic diversity and unique population of our area. They can also reveal bonds between family members and discern who was prominent in a community. Dates of deaths can also indicate our life expectancy without forensic analysis. The presence of a war memorial additionally reveals the occurrence of a significant national event that continues to affect us today, preserved through this material aspect. Furthermore, grave markers and other funeral implements can reveal the material aspects of a community. Materials used to construct markers and coffins can reflect the level of material access and technological progress and provide valuable social documents in the changes of taste, custom, and design. The style and organisation of graves can also reflect beliefs and notions about death and life, such as the way the diminishing frequency of crosses on grave markers reflects secularization and how the size of grave marker indicates the relative power of adults over children and the rich over poor, although this was more prominent in ancient times.
In conclusion, while freedom of belief is becoming more apparent, funerals and burials remain to be one of the most significant passages of life that will continue to evolve, created out of our humanistic desire to create meaning out of the certainty of death.
All funerary practices, including that of the Celts, are among the few archaeological visible forms of practices that hint at beliefs. In fact, they are often interpreted as synonymous for beliefs about an afterlife. Furthermore, the burial rites of this ancient civilization allow us to gain insight into the aspects of their conventional practices, including their social strata, material culture, and living environments.
Although our culture is technologically advanced, these revelations can be likened to our local community, where an abundance of our local history continues to be preserved through our written and structural tradition in relation to the treatment of the dead. Hence, although cemeteries are seen as endpoints in life, for making connections from present to past, they can also serve as starting points.